Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Good evening, everybody. You've got the Flicksation Podcast. This is our quarantine special, episode number 11 here as we gather for another one of our world-famous quarantine specials. Tonight, I am joined by Robert Gassaway, Phoenix, Arizona. Robert, what's happening?
Just trying to survive with everything that's going on, and we're in the middle of a heat wave, so hunkered down and trying to watch stuff and talk about it with you guys on the podcast. So great to be back together with you guys.
Christian Estabrook from over at It's Only a Podcast and the Third Act Podcast, back for another go-around here, Christian. I think the quality, at least on the first film we're going to talk about, a little higher than what we've been dragging you on here for. But, yeah, welcome back.
Good to be here. Yeah, this is so strange. We're not talking about Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider or anything. Do you guys have any surprises for me? That seems to be the flavor of what I've been talking about on the podcast recently. But yes, no, happy to be here.
Speaking of that, I just randomly ran across. So in 2019, Nicolas Cage was in a film called Grand Isle. Have either of you seen this thing?
Oh, never heard of it.
No.
I forget. It's 2019, and apparently him and his wife, oh my God, lure in. Oh, I'm going to look that up here in a second, because that's I can't believe I'd never heard of this film. But so yeah, tonight we're going to talk about Hamilton, July 3rd here in the States. It dropped on Disney Plus about a year and 3 months before it was supposed to be a theatrical release. Disney, which paid the most amount of money anybody has for this type of property in the past, going ahead and just throwing this out there for their streaming service instead of trying to recoup that money on the theater circuit, which was supposed to be an October release of 2021. So Hamilton, yeah, this thing actually recorded in 2016. This has most of the original cast. There's a couple of ensemble people that were missing from this. The guy that plays King George came back. The original guy came back to make this recording. Was from 3 different nights. That guy came back for those 3 nights. So Hamilton 2020, the real life of one of America's foremost founding fathers and the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. This one stars Lin-Manuel Miranda, Felipe Sue, and Leslie Odom Jr., the work of Lin-Manuel Miranda here. So, all right, so yeah, musical. This is the stage play just recorded and put into, movie form, I guess. But it is a recording of the stage show. This once again, the original cast. They started off Broadway, cleaned up on awards and stuff, moved to Broadway shortly after that. It's been pretty much the hottest musical property out there ever since the 2015-2016 realm. There's a couple of traveling troupes now. It still plays on Broadway. Of course, all that is suspended right now for obvious reasons. But yeah, so Christian, you are the one that's actually seen this show live. Different cast, so kind of have experience with both of these things here. So how did the live experience work for you? That's a couple of years removed now at this point, I believe. But how did that work for you? How does the film work for you? Just compare the two.
Yeah, so I actually, I would say I've had three distinct experiences with Hamilton, because before seeing it live, I saw it in San Francisco. Must have been 2017, I suppose. Maybe, yeah, it must have been 2017 that I saw it in the city. But I had been listening to it on the original cast recording soundtrack for at least a year or so before that. So I was very familiar with the music before even seeing it live. And I don't think I was actually critical of anyone, but before that, I was really like confused while on the outside of the Hamilton phenomenon, because I would see people talking about it and making references to it, but I didn't really understand how so many people could be obsessed with something that was only available in New York on Broadway. And the idea of listening to the soundtrack and that being, creating super fans just seemed really bizarre to me. It didn't seem like something that would be possible. So I was not really resistant, but just very confused by that. And so I started listening to the soundtrack. And even the first couple of times I listened to it, it didn't quite click for me. But then I kept listening to it over and over again. I've listened to it countless times by now, and I grew to love the original soundtrack that they have, that was recorded a bit before this. I think that was recorded in 2015. So going and seeing it live was it was incredible. I mean, it was a completely different cast. It was all different actors and performers for that, but it's the exact same production that they have on the Disney Plus version that they recorded, which really kind of opened my eyes to the whole experience, because I knew the songs very well, but it was hard for me to track the actual plot of what was happening without seeing everything. And the play is so technical when it comes to that turntable that they have on the table, which is appropriate, I suppose, for a hip hop musical. But they have this part of the stage that turns, and the way things move around. It was also very confusing until seeing it live. And it was even more easy after watching on Disney Plus. But a lot of the main actors play multiple characters, which is really hard to keep track of if you're seeing it only, or if you're even if you're sitting very far away in a theater. But now watching on Disney Plus, that's all very clear. But honestly, I think all three ways that I've experienced this, listening to the soundtrack as my introduction, seeing it live in San Francisco, and now having the opportunity, being so familiar with this, to see the original cast perform this on stage with oftentimes with the cameras right up close, so you can really capture so many details of this performance. I think it's an incredible experience each and every time. I think Hamilton is an amazing work. And honestly, I guess I'm certainly not an expert on live theater or musical theater by any means. I love musical movies, and I've grown to love them a lot over the last few years, but I have seen very few live productions of anything in my life. But if it's very difficult for someone to get to see Hamilton on a stage, either by geography or by finances, honestly, I don't, I'm hedging even as I'm attempting to say this. Honestly, I think you're okay watching the Disney Plus version. Like, stay at home, make a big deal out of it, hunker down, turn off your phone, have a focused viewing, try and preserve as much of a quality viewing as possible. But the Disney Plus version is so good. Honestly, I think that's perfectly fine if that's the only way people will get to experience, and I'm sure that will be the case. I'm sure millions of more people will get to see it now than would have been able to before, and I don't think you're really missing out much, to be honest. It's a perfect recapturing of what it is. Really, the only changes is they have like a couple record scratches that they messed with on the soundtrack to bleep out a couple F words. Other than that, it's the entire thing front to back. And honestly, this version, it is an enhancement of seeing it live in a lot of ways. I mean, some of the big ones is, you get so close to these characters, and those close-ups I think are so valuable watching this filmed version. Probably the one that's brought up in that point or in that vein most often or first and foremost is King George, played by Jonathan Groff, who Eric mentioned came back for this. You see his performance, and that's such an interesting character. He's on for 3 short songs of a 2-hour and 40-minute play, and he's not in it anywhere at all. So you imagine this guy, he's like sitting in the green room for like 2.5 hours, and then he's on stage for 10 minutes and does that for months. It's pretty insane. But you see this character, and the camera's so close, and you see him like spittle like dripping out of his mouth the entire time. Yeah. It's terrifying in the COVID era, but just from a performance, it's hilarious and it's committed and it's a little bizarre. But it just adds so much to that character, and that character kills seeing it live. That's the biggest laughs, a lot of audience participation during each of the King's songs, but seeing it like this, it adds even more to it than you would get listening to the soundtrack, or in most cases seeing it live, unless you have incredible seats that I would never be able to afford. So things like that, and I think as I've become more familiar with the Hamilton production, like the things I appreciate about it have continued to kind of change and evolve. Like now, I think Aaron Burr is maybe one of, if not my favorite characters in the play, and seeing Leslie Odom Jr. perform, he's my favorite performance in this version, the Disney Plus version. So you have the close-ups of him during he only has a couple of songs that he's really able to showcase. A lot of times he's a part of the ensemble, but seeing him I think is something that's also a huge benefit. The way they edit together some of the more complicated scenes, like where time rewinds in the first half of the play, or the duels and how that's captured, Hurricane late in the play, some of those, the way those are captured and they edit it together. It's hard to even really call this a film. It's kind of a weird thing, but there are some filmic choices that are made. And I think every choice that's made is a good one in this production and in this presentation. They seem to know really well when to cut in, when to have the wider shots, when to kind of cut between different angles. So Hamilton in the big picture is incredible, and I'd love to get in after hearing your guys' thoughts on favorites and songs and what sticks out most for you guys. But comparing all the different experiences, this one is right up there, just about as incredible as any other way that I've had the experience of watching this production.
Robert, you saw it first a couple of weeks ago, and you had rewatched it just before we recorded this. Why don't you go ahead? What do you think? I don't want you to miss your shot.
Wouldn't that be terrible? But it might make for a great song. I thought it was amazing, but I just was impressed that it lived up to the hype, because I hadn't listened to the soundtrack. I didn't think that I don't ever really want to hear songs from musicals outside of the musical. Like, I think it belongs in the musical, and it just is built for that format. And so I don't ever listen to soundtracks to any movies, much less musicals. But I had heard the hip hop album that Questlove had put together with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and thought it was okay. But I could hear the references, and I knew some of the political story. You learn the Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton story, and their intersection. You hear that in history class growing up, but you forget most of it. I heard just all the hype around it, and people were just over the moon for it. So I expected to like it when I eventually saw it, but never had the chance to be around where they were showing it or could afford a ticket. So I thought maybe it'll happen eventually when it gets cheaper and it comes to a city near me. But so I thought it was really cool that Disney did take they didn't go the most profitable route, that they did put it out a year early and before a theater run. And I loved it enough to where I would see it in a theater eventually. Well, assuming theaters are ever safe to go to again, but then I would love to see it in a theater, even though I've seen it on Disney Plus now. One thing I kind of realized was that Lin-Manuel Miranda has become such a huge star because of this work, because of Hamilton. But I watch it, and I knew this before, but it really just sunk in that he's not a particularly good actor, and he's not a particularly good singer, but he's just so talented. He's just widely considered a genius songwriter because of this work, because of Hamilton. You see it once and you're like, this guy, it goes beyond just writing clever rap songs, but it definitely has that. It has other musical forms and the things he's writing for other people to perform, and the amount of shine that he gives to the supporting characters is unusual. You wouldn't see that in a film version of this. It's the most impressive thing I've seen from Miranda, I love what he did for Moana. I haven't seen some of his other stuff, but he's somebody that, just in any type of music right now, people are looking to him as one of the better songwriters and what's he going to do next. And I was just kind of thrilled by the way it moves out of the gate. I did see the runtime before I hit play, but it goes and it's impassioned and it's energetic and it's the propulsive storyline towards a known outcome. We know how it's going to end, but getting us there is a ride. I like that structure that Christian mentioned with multiple roles. I thought that was clever, and it's not unusual for a stage play. But the fact that it's a sung through musical where there's no dialogue. There's one bit of dialogue. I think when they read a letter, they read a sad letter. There's a few words spoken, but it's 99.9% sung through. I'm similar to Christian, where I used to not think I liked musicals, but over the last 5 years, 8 years, every musical I see, I usually like. But there's still some out there, like I don't think I'll like Chicago, just from what the vibe I get from it, from what I've seen from the outside looking in. It kind of doesn't seem like my kind of musical. And most of the ones I like La La Land or whatever other musicals, the Sweeney Todd, they're usually not sung through. There's usually dialogue in between. And here it really works to be sung through. And I think it has the best string of hits, the best string of songs or numbers, as they call them in the industry, like just together, just one after another, and they call back to each other, and it's a variety of styles, and it's not just hip hop, but it was great for me being a big fan of hip hop to recognize the nods to dozens of songs that I recognize snippets from. I also wasn't expecting to have the story of the women be as prominent as they were, or at least Eliza. She gets the most story, and she has 3 or 4 songs, I think. I was like surprised, or I like that it had that good stretches of like feminine energy to break up this boys' club of the political plot that you're going to get between George Washington and Hamilton and the founding fathers. It's smart to bring in some female characters, and I would say, Odom was my favorite performance, but Philippa Sue playing Eliza, Daveed Diggs. The second watch, I would say George Washington, the guy that plays him, stood out to me more.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. As far as like being a film, you kind of touched on that. It feels like since it is a musical that's sung through, it almost feels like a concert film. It's almost like how people like widely regard either. Some people say "Gimme Shelter," right? The Rolling Stones is the best rock documentary, but the best concert film or best concert film, there's kind of a subcategory for rock documentaries. But Jonathan Demme's "Stop Making Sense," Talking Heads, is amazing, and it's a concert film with no breaks. It's not like it's not a documentary. It doesn't show behind the scenes or anything, just like this doesn't. But this kind of feels like that, where you feel like you're in the audience, and it's just so amazing what they're filming. It's a filmed performance, so it's not really a film, but it does feel very at home in the documentary sort of section, even though it's not technically that either. But it is like the best thing I've seen in 2020. And I was just so impressed that it lives up to the hype, just like kind of like Roma did a couple years ago, where people were like, "Oh yeah, it's easily the best film of the year." And then I saw it, I'm like, "Yeah, it totally lived up to the hype." This does that. And it is kind of a documentary and a kind of a snippet in time, because it is 2016. And I'm thinking about what this cast was doing every day to go to Broadway and do multiple shows a day to the record-breaking box office and acclaim. And I vaguely remember some kind of Mike Pence incident where like people wanted to boycott Hamilton for some reason. I don't remember the details. So it's like a snapshot thinking back to 4 years ago or whatever it was. And then the opportunities that were ahead for some of the cast, like Daveed Diggs, or certainly what Miranda went on to do, or Leslie Odom Jr. The King of England just steals the interludes. I love when stage plays do that, where they have a main storyline, but then they do something clever in the interludes. Here, it's the King of England, where it doesn't feel like an interlude. It's part of the story, just from the other side of the ocean. And I like that we get those things. We get the opponent's viewpoints of our protagonist. This is not a puff piece musical biopic, right? We see his affair and his sort of self-expose of his affair. I had forgotten that his son died in a duel as well. But I mean, I've heard that this historical accuracy is not the strong suit. I've just seen it twice and loved it just from a pure like diversified entertainment standpoint. Like when I first watched it, I think on 4th of July, it felt like a good sort of patriotic thing to watch on our nation's birthday. And within the first 10 minutes, I'm like, if this continues like this is something I'm going to be watching over and over again. And so now I've seen it twice in a couple of weeks, and I could just see me watching this over and over again, which is rare for something that's a musical that's this long. And like, I don't know, it's just kind of this undeniable stroke of genius. And beyond that, it's just playful and joyful and moving. I teared up in a few moments when Leslie Odom's talking to his son, and then Hamilton's character talks to his son, and prior to that, when Odom's song "Wait for It," that's a great song. And then later on, when Eliza is coming to terms with her husband's affair and their son's passing, those are all really touching moments. So it just kept kind of walloping me over the head with how it kept going and maintaining that momentum and just playing the hits. It's like a great jukebox. And so maybe I would be interested in the soundtrack now after seeing the film. Eric, you mentioned that his title was Secretary of the Treasury. I didn't really grasp that, but I know he's on the $10 bill. And I'm thinking, who's Secretary of the Treasury now? Oh, Steve Mnuchin.
Yeah.
Lineage, huh? From Hamilton to Mnuchin. That's quite a story about it.
Yeah, it's been weasels for the last 20 presidents or whatever, but probably before that too. My history is a little shaky on the secretaries of the Treasury, but came through Madison about a year ago. It was even the tough seats were in the $300 to $400 range, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it because you got to at least bring somebody too, so it's over $1,000 night probably if you take your spouse or whatever. So it just couldn't do it. But this, it definitely lived up to the hype to me. And I appreciate hip hop. It's not completely my thing. There are hip hop albums that I love, but there's not a ton of it that I specifically listen to myself. So I figured it was a hit or miss thing there. And just my dislike of the last batch of musicals from the last 10 years at least or whatever. I was just afraid I wasn't going to like this as much as I was hoping to, but it definitely hit for me. I think this is a different animal. I don't know if documentary is the right wording for it or whatever, but when you just film the stage play, and I think for a film that is all music and no dialogue per se, like you said, there's maybe 1% of it is actually spoken dialogue. Les Miserables is a perfect example of how when there's not any dialogue, it just does, as a film, it's just not going to work for me. It always seems, I don't know, cheaper and shittier when those are set to like real scenes or whatever, but when they're played out on a stage, it seems to work a lot better for me. I don't see this working nearly as well if there's settings and stuff. I think the whole heart and soul of this thing is the musical aspect of it, and just the way the performance comes off. I don't see much for Broadway stuff, obviously, but man, this blew my mind how good these people are at what they do, and all the design and all the choreography, and everything has to be in perfect sync. I mean, I'm sure these guys have been doing it for a couple years at this point, so yeah, it's a well-oiled machine by then. But yeah, for me, I'm glad we get this cast for sure. I didn't know much about any of these guys other than Banuel's behind this whole thing, so yeah, an immense musical talent, and I agree. He's not the flashiest guy in the cast here, but I think it does ground this actual film performance quite a bit to have him there instead of some high caliber singer or whatever. It just fits here, and it does add heart to this for me. But yeah, Leslie Odom, man, huge, and Daveed Diggs both kind of blew my mind here. I love Diggs in the Jefferson stuff in the second half. At least, I don't know if it was kind of written around this particular cast or whatever, so you would think the original cast is kind of the direction some of this ended up going in. So
that's definitely the case. Yeah, Lin-Manuel Miranda, he had a couple of plays that weren't as successful, but were definitely successful before this. So he had worked with virtually everyone who was in Hamilton before this. not even just the performers, but like the what is it, the conductor, like and some of the tech people, the director had been with him for a lot of this. So like, for example, like a lot of the Daveed Diggs stuff, because he raps completely different than pretty much everyone else in this. So as he's writing the songs, he's writing it for these specific characters, and he worked on it for years and years and years before it ever debuted. But that, and I think that's part of the genius of this, is so many of these songs just fit so perfectly because of the songwriting and because they're perfectly tailored to the performers that Miranda already had a relationship with.
Yeah, you got to see it. If you have Disney, there's no reason you shouldn't. I was pretty much hooked immediately, so I think this is fantastic.
I mean, I guess that kind of proves it. I was familiar with it for years before watching it this way, and this was both of yours introduction, and we're pretty much exactly on the same page. So I think that speaks to the unqualified success here. Robert, I wanted to circle back around because I know, I mean, you and I have talked many times, are more steeped in hip hop, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about what you thought of this from that angle, because I know Miranda obviously is very influenced by like early 90s rap, and there's even like certain lines, like references to hip hop in some of the songs, and that's not really my era of hip hop. Like I'm more, of course there's stuff from this period that I love, but I kick in more in like the Jay-Z early 2000s era. But from that angle, do you think it's successful as a hip hop musical, or do you even think of it that way? Or what did you think of it from that angle?
Yeah, it's definitely successful as a hip hop musical. I mean, how many of those are there? I mean, like, what was Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk? The Tap one had like some hip hop influence to it, but I mean, the diversity of the cast helped give credibility to it being hip hop, even though Lin-Manuel Miranda's not known, he's not from the hip hop world, but he's absolutely influenced by, this is East Coast hip hop references that he's given throughout, hip hop the same way as Hamilton, where it was a New York thing. People heard it on the radio or in the boroughs of New York. You couldn't hear it all across the country, but it got so big that it was undeniable, the same kind of force. So many little lines, and they're not just quotes of songs. He's not just quoting songs. Sometimes he quotes it. Sometimes he puts a little spin on it. It's like a wink at the line, or the way he says, slow down for somebody. He says it like a sample in a song that I don't even know who sings it or what the song's called. I just know I've heard it. And from the era, it's East Coast, it's late 80s, early 90s. And it's a sample that he obviously grew up hearing as well. And so, the fact that the political story is based on the East Coast as well, talking about upstate New York when they want to get away. And he's from, like Alexander Hamilton's house is like preserved in upstate New York, like in Jackson Heights, and Miranda's from Washington Heights. His next film is called In the Heights. And so there's kind of parallels there, like an immigrant story as well, those parallels. And so, yeah, that's the kind of parallels to a lot of stories that are told in hip hop, is the outsider perspective, or trying to shift the powers that be, upset the control of power and shift the power base. But it also to inspire people or to tell stories you don't hear elsewhere. That's like this storytelling, this play, this endeavor by Miranda has a hip hop attitude as it goes about its business. It's trying to shed light in places that's usually not shown. It's trying to take stories that are sometimes marginalized and kind of put them more mainstream, or appeal to a different audience, or influence others. So you can see it has that dual. You can see the influence running through the veins of Hamilton, but even in the last 5 years, how impactful or inspirational it's been to the people that watch it, inspiring little kids to want to tell stories in different ways and kind of remix the history told by the winners. How about we let's look at it from another perspective, or inject it with a more modern sort of backdrop, and the voices coming from different places. I don't know, just updating it across the board, I think gives it, hip hop's not that old either. And so imagine if there's no way this could have existed in an earlier time. Broadway's had hits, Cats, and all these hits over the years, but Hamilton could not have popped up on Broadway at an earlier time than it did. I don't think it's really unique in that way. It's really one of the most impressive musicals ever. It's probably my favorite musical ever, but I'm not that steeped in it. I've never seen one on Broadway, certainly.
Well, get back to me after you see 2019 version of Cats, please.
Yeah, so I guess I would bring up some similarities to probably what's my favorite musical of all time. And I know this is going to sound probably surprising to some folks, but my favorite musical probably is still Jesus Christ Superstar.
Wow.
The rockness of it is just the rockness and the way the vocals are and stuff. Aside from the subject matter is perfect for that kind of musical. So another one that they made a movie of, and instead of the stage show, they tried to make a movie of it. It's again that one's all singing too. Movie doesn't really work very well, I don't think. And I don't like really the cast on the musical version or the movie version as much as I like the cast on the album version or whatever, but very similar too. It's like Jesus and Judas kind of are Aaron Burr and Hamilton here, kind of friends at first, not really ever real friends, and then it really goes to shit at the end or whatever. So I don't know, found some similarities there, and just I like this almost as much as I like that, and I might end up liking this more after a couple of rewatches, because I first watched this like 2 days ago, and I've definitely been pining to rewatch it again. And I've located Spotify did have the album, so that's probably in my near future as well. So
nice.
Yeah. So if you guys were to letterbox this, which you probably have already, what's the prognosis, Christian?
I mean, it's really tough. Like, I don't really know what I'm rating. Like, Hamilton as a production is like a 5-star thing pretty easily, but am I rating like the film? I marked it as 4 stars. I didn't really know what to do with this. It is on my letterbox as 4-star, but it's like, am I rating how they captured this with cameras or the production in and of itself? And it's all kind of murky too, because the stated director of this version is the director of the play. Like, we don't even know like whoever cut this together with cameras and the different shots. Like, that person isn't even listed as a director or anything. So I don't know, 4 stars, but whatever. It's incredible. It's 100% a must see regardless.
Yeah, and I'm probably right there at 4 as well, but I'm very certain this could go up a 0.5 star on a rewatch. So we'll see how it catches on with me going forward, Robert.
Yeah, I had it at a 4.5 early on, and it never slipped, and so it stayed there. And the same on rewatch. And I didn't have anything to compare it to since I hadn't seen it before or even knew the songs before. So just encapsulated as a Disney Plus watch on 4th of July. It's excellent, and excellent is 4.5 for me. And I think it comes along at a great time, that kind of, with this social political movement going on. But yeah, I think the way it's captured on the stage, the way it's performed, the story it's telling, but also the story coming out to a wider audience right now, all that goes into my enjoyment of it. So that impacts the rating. So I've got it as the highest rated thing I've seen this year, film or otherwise.
Real quick, as Robert mentions the timeliness of this, as we're seeing coverage or maybe even taking part of tearing down statues across the country. I just want just a PSA for anyone who doesn't know this. You can totally be a fan of Hamilton and also hate the founding fathers. Just want to let everyone know that is certainly possible. Most of these people are slave owners, probably really terrible in real life, but the artistic presentation here is worth something different than those actual people.
And the titular character is considerably less shitty than most founding fathers. So just based on a lot of things. But yeah, man, check it out. It is a monster work. That's what I will say. So let's move on into the quick fix here and throw it over to Robert. Robert, you've been checking out some stand-up comedy recently.
Yeah, as I said, that Hamilton's my number 1 rated film of the year, movie of the year. I actually have 3 in my top 5 that are just filmed performances because Hamilton's number 1, and then I have Hannah Gadsby Douglas, that stand-up, number 4, and then Middleditch and Schwartz, which I believe Christian saw as well. That's
I did.
Improv comedy filmed on stage. That's 3 hour-long performances on stage in different cities. They toured around, but 3 of them were filmed for this special. And so these 2 break the format of or play with the format of stand-up comedy. They're not really stand-up comedy, just like Hamilton's not really a documentary. These aren't either. But like I said, Lin-Manuel Miranda's known as a genius songwriter. He's also known as a genius freestyle rapper, which is improvisation. One of the most common forms that we see in media would be freestyle rapping, but also improv comedy. And that's what Middleditch and Schwartz, Thomas Middleditch, the star of Silicon Valley, and then Ben Schwartz, who I've loved for a long time, known as John Ralphio on Parks and Rec. So these guys came up through Second City, I think, or UCB Theater in New York, and learned improv from some of the best. And so I love stand-up comedy when the comedians are so comfortable on stage. They like to do crowd work. They don't care about what they're going to say next. They just want to find some spark of inspiration and then take it from there. So that's what improv does here. These guys just ask somebody in the crowd a couple of questions, and then they perform for an hour based on that quick feedback at the beginning. Really clever, playing off each other, really playful, really I don't know, just the talent, and I was impressed by it equally as much as I was entertained by it. I could watch that style of stand-up or comedy every night of the week. That's just kind of my jam. And then similarly with Hannah Gadsby, I've just been really curious to see what she would do next. Her first stand-up special, or first like global one that people knew of, I guess. She's an Australian comedian, I believe. That one kind of broke the mold for being so introspective and deep, and kind of like getting really serious and saying this is not about humor. It's really fucked up, and sort of bringing up feminist issues or gender politics, and letting the air out of the room at will, and then putting it back in with some humor, making it light, and then taking the wind out of the room again. Very skillfully in her first stand-up special, which was Nanette. Now her follow-up is called Douglas, and it's kind of the same. It's not, I don't think, quite as good as Nanette, but it's similar, where it's like half stand-up and half like a great TED Talk. Some people cringe at thinking of a TED Talk, and it's like a punchline for some people, but a good TED Talk, I think, is really enlightening and insightful, and Hannah Gadsby is the type that can really do that. She's covering some of the similar ground. She's talking about things that other comedians certainly don't, especially male comedians, of course. But really clever and heartfelt, and she's vulnerable on stage, which makes her that much more compelling and endearing. So I was impressed with her sophomore stand-up, and can't wait to see what she does next. Christian, did you see that one? Did you see Hannah Gadsby's follow-up?
I haven't yet. I certainly will at some point, because Nanette is probably the best stand-up special I've ever been exposed to. It's incredible. So I'm definitely going to watch Douglas at some point. It's certainly on my list, and also want to echo you on Middleditch and Schwartz, which I didn't know what to expect from 3 improv performances, and I think it's far funnier than it has any right to be. It's really, really good as well.
Yeah, I think I have them both at 4 stars. So they're both in my top 5 of the year, but I haven't been watching a lot of films that I've anticipated that maybe could be in my number 1 for the year. So I've got a lot of catching up to do. It's just been a weird year. So I've just been watching a few streaming things. And if you're doing the same, I highly recommend both of those on Netflix.
Okay, so Middleditch and Schwartz is on Netflix. All right, because, yeah, that definitely sounds up my alley. Christian, what have you got here for the quick fix?
Yeah, most of the stuff I've been watching lately, I've been doing a lot of rewatches. Rewatched some Hitchcock with my wife. Her first views of North by Northwest and Rear Window we did in the last 2 weeks, so that was pretty fun. And then pretty much everything else I've watched has been 4 podcasts, be it Flicksation, Third Act, or It's Only a Podcast. So I'll be documenting on pretty much everything else. The only other new thing I watched is The Old Guard on Netflix, which is a new like a sci-fi action movie with Charlize Theron. It's directed by Gina Prince Bythewood. And I don't know, when I first heard of it, I kind of brushed it off because most of the big high-profile Netflix stuff is, when it comes to movies, has been pretty much shit across the board that I'm familiar with, or I just skip completely, like the Will Smith one with the orcs and what was I don't know, it doesn't matter, but pretty much all the big action movies on Netflix look completely terrible. So most of them I would.
That's the one you're thinking of, Triple Threat.
Triple Threat. No, the one with
Bright.
Oh,
Bright is the Will Smith one, and then there was the Michael Bay one earlier this year. That's what I was thinking.
Oh yeah.
Of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most stuff that I won't even give a chance to, let alone actually sit through. So I guess the old guard won me over to some degree. I think probably like the star and director got me interested. This is the first time, I guess, that like a big budget action movie, like an action movie that cost tens of millions of dollars, has been directed by a Black woman. So that's interesting and also kind of troubling and weird, to be honest.
It's like a comic book movie too, right?
It's based on a graphic novel. So basically what the story is Charlize Theron leads a small army. There's like 5 people and they can't die. They're kind of like Wolverine in that they can get chopped up, shot up, whatever, just completely maimed, and then they'll pretty quickly heal and be back to normal. They do feel all the pain, so they definitely grunt and they don't enjoy that experience. But it's a whole team of people who are basically, I don't know, they don't really get into it. For some reason, they're chosen or they turn into having these powers. So Charlize Theron's the leader. She's been around for like over 1,000 years. So there's like flashbacks to like medieval and dark ages and all these different time periods where she's been basically like fighting back. They basically see themselves as kind of like a force for good. So they help oppressed people or try to influence their immediate surroundings in some way. But I don't know, this movie has way more potential than I think it actually cashes in on. I don't know, just the idea of a group of basically Wolverine type superhero godlike characters, and then the big bad that this movie sets them up against is the actor who played Dudley in Harry Potter as a pharma bro who looks like Mark Zuckerberg with a hoodie and a suit jacket that he wears the entire movie. It's just like, really? Like that's this group of like amazing, unbelievable, otherworldly characters. This is the story that we're deciding to tell with them. So it's pretty frustrating from that angle. The film mostly follows Charlize Theron as a leader, and then Kiki Lane is a younger actress who plays like a new person who kind of joins this group. She just inherits she dies and then she comes back, and then when she's alive she can't die from that point on. So we get a lot of like the getting used, testing out your powers type origin story, but the rest of them are all really well familiar with everything. But I don't know. I mean, the other thing that really sticks out is I really didn't want this movie to be as boring as it was. The movie's pretty heavy. Like it's about dealing with grief and like generational trauma that accumulates over hundreds and hundreds of years, which I get that that's what they were going for, and I hate to criticize it and saying I wish the movie was something different, but I don't know. I wish that these characters, after being alive for hundreds of years, had developed a little bit more of a personality in that time, because they pretty much just glower and grimace in between fight scenes, and the fight scenes aren't incredible. It's not like John Wick level, or I guess a more appropriate comparison, I really wanted this to be Atomic Blonde-esque, because Charlize Theron is incredible in that, and there's incredible fight scenes. The fight scenes here are okay. The world building seems like it has potential, but they don't really, I don't know, they don't really live up to it in most cases. So I thought this was kind of a dud. They certainly leave it open for a sequel. Like it's as wide open for a sequel as the Super Mario Brothers movie from 1993. So maybe the second trip will be a better one. I might watch that, but for this, I don't know. If you're really hard up for an action movie or Charlize Theron completist, go for it. But it's got some positives, but also some groan-worthy stuff as well. So a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's kind of a slow period for movies anyway, but I thought I'd probably be watching a lot of movies in the recent, slowdown of everyday life, and I've actually been on hard quarantine here now for almost 2 weeks, where I haven't been able to go to work even. But stuck in here with 2 young children. Not much time for stuff that I actually, would want to watch in an adult form, except for at night, and then it's TV with my wife. So not a lot of films, but or at least not a lot of films that pretty much every film I watch other than rewatches is stuff for the show here that we've talked about. So I will mention that I've definitely seen a lot we've been kind of plowing through the Disney catalog. Just the Disney films in particular. We've pretty much hit all the old Golden Age ones and stuff. So it's been very interesting seeing a lot of those for not the first time, but the first time in quite some time. There's a couple of them I like a lot that I've seen a few times, but like Snow White, I couldn't tell you the last time I saw that.
One of the best.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. Pinocchio still holds up for sure. Dumbo is a really hard watch because of some of the stuff in there. And these are all barely over an hour, so there's, to get ready.
Sleeping Beauty? Did you do Sleeping Beauty?
Sleeping Beauty, yeah. Not my favorite. Cinderella, impressed. Better than I expected. Aristocats still hits hard for me. Let's see. Alice in Wonderland not delivering very well for me.
101 Dalmatians?
Yeah, good. That was a good one. So yeah, it's kind of up and down, but it's been fun rewatching those. Just about every season on the show here, I mention Bosch when it comes out on Amazon Prime because I think it's a very, very good show. Yeah, it's detectives, so I know the police thing probably isn't on the top of everybody's list right now, but I still say check it out. There's one season yet to be filmed, and then it's over. I think this was season 6 or whatever, but especially if you were into The Wire, a lot of actors from The Wire on this show, actually, so another season delivers there. Yeah, I've watched a lot of other TV that I don't want to talk about because it's not good. And
Real House.
No, I wish it was Real Housewives. It's like those speed dating shows and stuff. There's I did see Space Force, and I will say, Space Force funnier than I expected. It's 10 episode, half hours episode season on Netflix. This one's Steve Carell and John Malkovich and a bunch of other kind of character comedians. It's well cast, it's pretty funny, roasts Trump pretty good too, so that's always useful. And yeah, plenty of John Malkovich here if he is your flavor. So I think this show turned out to be a lot better than I expected. It's not a great show. I'm not gonna say it's fantastic, but it was much better than I expected. Looking for an easy background watch or something, Space Force could be worse, guys. Ringing endorsement, it could be worse.
What about Floor is Lava?
My wife and kids watched it. I did not.
So. We finished that this week. Yeah. It's so dumb, but it's totally watchable especially if you watch those like old Nickelodeon like Double Dare type shows.
Sure did.
30 years ago or whenever that was. It's pretty fun. Pretty fun.
All right, guys. Another successful quarantine special here once again. Thanks, Robert, for joining us.
Yeah, we got to get back on track. Just when you think things can't get any worse, now I hear that the floor is made out of lava. So I don't know how I'm going to approach that. If you got any tips, reach out to me on social media at Robert Gassaway on Letterboxd and Twitter.
You're in Phoenix, Arizona, so my guess is the pavement is...
Yeah, the air is lava.
Yeah, a lot of lava.
All lava.
Christian, thanks again, man. I'm sure we'll come up with some more garbage for you to watch here in the short term.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to not talk about terrible movies on the Flicksation podcast, and I did not throw away my shot. All right. On that note, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. I'm at AnotherXTIN. And of course, when I'm not here talking about Hamilton or bad movies, you can hear me on It's Only a Podcast and the Third Act podcast, also talking about movies.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you soon. For Robert and Christian, this is Eric saying we will catch you on the Flick side.